Ladies and gentlemen.
Oh my word, Dennis.
Okay, I'm going to see if I can, well, first of all, we'll see. If I use my outdoor voice, I'm hoping that maybe you can hear me without the distortion of our speaker box. It does feel like the outdoors, doesn't it? You know, once in a while when you have a platform, you get an opportunity to recognize real positive things. And I would offer up, is there anyone in this room that has been influenced or has a positive experience by dealing with someone who has shown strength through breast cancer? Do any of you have that experience? So I would like to tonight recognize all of our survivors and give them a nice round of applause. So, wow, you know, today's a big day. It's an exciting day. It's a fun day. It's a nerve-wracking day. We've spent days and hours with our facilities action team putting together tons and tons of work. We've brought bits and pieces to you, but anytime you take a risk, it always is nerve-wracking to see the results. So today, if you haven't been home, and I bet some of you haven't, because maybe it's come right from the work site, I think about 20,000 newspapers went out today, and so our community is absolutely saturated with, can you help us? And that's really a cool place to be, is to ask our community to truly be involved in public opinion survey. So if you haven't seen it yet, we do have copies here, and I think they'll probably give you copies in a bit, but it's just a big day for us. It's something that we look forward to for a long, long time, hoping that people will get involved and really be a part of what we're trying to accomplish. So part of my welcome included the opportunity to give you a response to your homework. You asked us a bunch of questions last time, and we analyzed it, and we coded it into a couple of broad categories. And I would like to, what I would suggest is, for the first time, our cabinet has met together to answer your questions and give you our, what I'm going to call, our expert opinion on some things. And I know throughout this process, a lot of people have said, when are you going to speak up? When's your admin or your administrative team going to weigh in? And it's tonight. Now, you need to know, we're not going to give preferences. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk and answer your questions, because that's going to be a really important part of the evening. So, how did we determine how we'd answer questions? Most of the questions that you all asked, I believe, was under the category of option differentiation. Okay, what does that mean? To us, it means that when we review the questions as a collective group, we look through the lens of, does the question help you better understand, or maybe even more clearly figure out, the difference between one option to the second option to the third option and so forth. And when possible, we're going to call out the differences. So the first broad category of your questions and homework was under enrollment. The response that we have here is that the district needs facilities for at least 1,600 students. That's come to be kind of common understanding of the groups. And this can be accommodated in a 1 or 2 high school design. Our team, I have some of them in the room. Put your hand up if you're part of what I'm calling my team. Okay? Some of my team is over at the other side too. We have 2 meetings going on. But these folks, we all got together and said, with the 4 options, can we make all 4 work? The answer is yes. All 4 options can work. The 4 designs can be managed for 10 plus years utilizing various small learning communities. Sometimes we look to differentiate by could my plan give us better experience or a better setup for future generations or future communities? It's our expert opinion that with some innovation, all 4 options can be managed for the future 10 plus years. There are some that are easier than others, but all of them could fit. The other thing that we talked about, and I think you as a group have probably thought about, is Shakopee is a very unique suburb. And for that uniqueness, we are very grateful as school leaders. And the designs that we create need to reflect that. And I'm going to talk about that. How are we different than a lot of these schools that we think are pretty darn good? So on the bottom here, this is where Shakopee is at for the number of students on free or reduced lunch. So what does that really mean? Free and reduced is a socioeconomic indicator. So if a student gets the aid, so to speak, they can eat a free or reduced lunch. This indicator, best practices taught us, that this is one of the most powerful indicators in schools who need to apply more resources to help make the playing field equal. Okay? So what I would want you to look at, we have Shakopee, Prior Lake, Stillwater, Eden Prairie, Minnetonka, Wayzata, and Diamond. Besides being excellent school districts, what else do they have in common? Yeah, one high school. So it's important to know, the last time we were doing this process, we stood up in front and we talked about 2 high schools as the preferred model. I think it's also important you know we're checking our bias at the door, because throughout this process we've learned a lot of things and we've kept an open mind and flexibility. So one of the things we want to show you is that as you consider a one large high school, and we're trying to avoid the term mega because it offends some people, so we're going to try and use large or extra large. How do these schools, I don't know which one's better. Nothing in my world extra large is anymore. It's always double or triple. Maybe it's triple extra large. I don't know. This is a wonderful gift, because when you think of moving the bar of achievement, there's this extra special thing that if you ask your principals about, when you make a difference in the life of a kid from poverty, you've really substantially raised the bar for not only that kid, but his or her family, their families. It's a big, big deal. So we're not saying it's a bad thing to have some free and reduced lunch in our world right now. In fact, I think we'd all be surprised at how the bar is set for how many families actually qualify for free and reduced. It's our society now. We've gone through that recession and everything, so we want to talk about that. Here's the other thing. We are different in the number of minority students. Now, let me start out by saying we're grateful for that. I can't believe how many people over our homecoming week, our Hall of Fame inductees said, "Thank goodness Shakopee finally looks like the rest of the world." And it's a beautiful thing. But I will also add that as a society, and for sure public education, we have done a very poor job of raising the bar for all students. We know there is an achievement gap for our black students, our Hispanic students, and so on and so forth. And when you have a higher percentage, you have a lot of work to do. That involves heavy lifting. We're not going to ignore that. We have to call that out. We have to say we're grateful, but it involves a lot of heavy lifting. Now, this one was asked last week too. So this is under operational costs and taxes. Operational costs are determined by the number of kids, the butts in the seats, how many kids we have enrolled, and square footage formula. So the 4 options that we're looking at your cabinet, my cabinet, our district admin have determined there isn't a significant difference with any one of those plans. Here's why. Enrollment drives the staffing, square footage drives operations. So if you take our current high school, our operational costs annually, $11,700,000. How is that broken out? With total staffing, $10.6 million. That's our current site. And that's about 1.1 if you throw in maintenance, utilities, stuff like that. So if you add 1,600 square feet, from a utility standpoint, it is what it is. And with the enrollment, you take X number of students per teacher, per para, per cook, per custodian, and you apply that formula. So it's enrollment driven. So none of these four options, we didn't see it as option differentiation issue. Okay? Now, the caveat here is, we could get in the weeds here and say, well, you know, does one require does one model have two principals? And what we thought about as a cabinet, if you start getting to that level of detail, you're probably into the what ifs and yeah buts. Because someone would say, well, gee, if you have two campuses, you have to have two head principals. Or do you have one head principal and four assistant principals, or two assistant principals? And it is what we determine it is. We do that based on student enrollment. So a lot of the intangibles, we get to decide as a school how we staff those buildings. But from a differentiation point, all four options that are brought forward, not a significant difference. Here's one, too, that is not what I would call school board approved. This is cabinet speaking. It's my district administrators. The technology plan that you have and the academic redesign that you have, with that, the district will have operational increases that will require voter approval from operational or capital funds. Simply put, we firmly believe that we will, again, not school board approved, this is here, we did it homework as administration. We will need to up our operational budget by asking you to support the operational budget. Okay? Not referendum is building, but operationally, you can expect that if we're going to be doing the things we say we're going to do, it could, and we're saying would, increase taxes from an operational standpoint. Where are we at? If we're talking about, hey, we might make some changes, are we already overdoing it? Well, I think this is kind of telltale, and I want to tell you, spending money in schools doesn't guarantee results. Spending does not equal results. It's what you do with it. So here's Shakopee at $724 per pupil spending. If you ask the teachers or administrators in the room per pupil, what would you do in the classroom if you were like these people and you would get that kind of change? I think Mike was at $8 million a year. Yeah. What would we do with $8 more million into our classrooms, directly putting it into classrooms? Again, those are questions and things that we'll have to decide as a community to what extent, because there's only so much money to go around. So we have to make some choices. I wouldn't want you to hear that we're suggesting we go from here to here. But we are. I would be unemployed tomorrow. But I am suggesting that I think there's some happy medium that we have to talk about as a community. Perceptions, under the bracket of homework questions. Up to this point, it's very important as members who serve on this committee and on the other committee, you have not heard a school board member or an administrator leading for direction. They have not given preference, they have not given one is better than three, and et cetera, et cetera. It is really important to know that the newspaper that went out today, that is 100% driven off of a very large and important group of people who struggled and worked hard. That is not your district trying to ramrod anything, okay? another perception. There is I think the question was something like, you know, the community last time said that they didn't want two high schools forever. All right? Well, there is that perception out there. Here is off of, we call it our exit, the survey.
Autopsy.
Autopsy, there you go. We do an autopsy survey. You can see the reasons people said for not supporting. There's a ton of reasons. There is a ton of reasons why people didn't support. In fact, I think you could see most people probably didn't have just one. They had probably many different reasons. So our team, our district administrators, as we look at options, it would not be fair to say that there is only one reason why something didn't go. We are acknowledging there are multiple reasons why it didn't go. Then, under the bracket of, we don't know a lot about this whole two campus, one mascot concept, so we brainstormed. Since there isn't another model right now like it, what would we do with it? So a couple thoughts were, each campus might have core classes that are the same, and then different electives on each campus. Okay, so that might be a real simplified way of dealing with it. Student interest drives course scheduling. So kids will pick the classes they want, and that's how we schedule them. You probably knew that already, but it's totally up to the students. We get to choose what we offer, but they get to choose what they pick is who we hire for teachers. And then classes being offered at one or both campuses, if 20 kids wanted AP Physics, and we didn't have a need for the two campuses to have both of those classes, probably wouldn't have to do it. Or if our numbers were down in a program, wouldn't necessarily have to have both those kinds of things at both campuses. It wouldn't be required to do that. Continuing on the same concept, our counselors and administration manage schedules. If we were challenged to create this two-campus approach, they would work together to minimize the number of times people go back and forth. For example, they would explore perhaps a college-type schedule. So it could be that a student could go to school at the AM or the PM. It could be that the students could do like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday classes, and then a different schedule for Tuesday, Thursdays, kind of like you would do if you were back in your college days. Does that make sense? That we could try to schedule like that. You can see that, you can understand there could be some complications clearly. We don't have all the answers yet. Co-oping sports and activities, I think that's kind of the general assumption that if we have two campuses, one mascot, you'd have people co-op together no matter what building you went to. And then the longer passing times, if you truly are going to allow for perhaps one switch a day, I mean, in your head, when you first think about it, it's like, okay, is that like 6 or 5 back forth, back forth, back forth? That wouldn't make sense to any of us on the cabinet. We didn't see that, but maybe once, maybe back and forth once. We were trying to think of how this option could work. We weren't negative on it. I would want you to know that. It's just that when you don't know what it looks like, it's a little scary. Creates a little anxiety, but we said, could we do it? Yes. And then there are questions about the academic and technology team. In fact, you're going to do table talk today. Our staff are currently on all these implementation teams, and it's on the board approved recommendations, and they're working really hard at redesign. There's going to be a parent survey coming out soon asking what your expectations are for your students. We're going to interview the students and ask the students what's your expectations for your life and your career. And then we're going to work with the board to make sure that we're giving our community what they need for coursework. Same will be true in elementary. We're designing a backward design. We're starting at the 6 through 12. But we are gearing up for the elementary and early childhood to make sure we have alignment and consistency and those kinds of things. So that's my welcome and homework. We are around too. When you do table talk, if you want us to pull up a chair and visit with you, any of these people are, because we did it together, any of the people here, our administrators and our board are here, many of our board are here, we're happy to answer any questions, which we always have. Questions before we move to the next piece? Okay, so we'll have, I think is it Dennis next?
All right, thank you.
All right, maybe I'll clean this.
I probably don't need it, thank you. We do a little recognition. We joked about betting if anybody would walk in with the same color tennis shoes.
I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no.
I lost the bet. A couple of you came close. You just looked out. But not the same thing. So again, Dennis Cheesebro, pleasure to be with you. I'm just going to spend a few minutes about going over the purpose of today, the process for today, and then we're going to have a bit of a presentation on middle level expansion and amenities. Again, the key role of the Guiding Coalition is for you to come together and work together to create statements of consultation to the superintendent and the board. And what we're focusing on tonight is on 5 different areas. Okay? As you develop those statements of consultation, we're going to ask you at your tables, you have large sheets of papers and markers, to make, if you can, to reach agreement on at least one statement in each area. Example, the academic and the tech recommendations, which are in your handout with brightly colored pieces. Okay? And JP and Nancy are going to be here. They're going to raise their hands in the back. And as you get in, they'll be able to answer any questions at your tables. If you think about those academic and tech recommendations in the facilities plan, statements of consultation, do you see a degree of fit or misfit and contradiction? Do you have any concerns about that? What would you say to the board in a nice short sentence with regards to academic and technology, accepted recommendations, and the 4 different options? I'll go down to another one. 1 versus 2 mascots. At your table, when you think about 1 versus 2 mascots, what advice would you give to the superintendent or board that reflects your table? Write it down. Now, I'm going to ask you this. There is a possibility that at any given table, you might have differing points of view, right? Is that a possibility? Okay, we can agree on that, right? Okay. I'll offer you this. Your different points of views are individual views. That's not your job. We're asking you to take on what makes a guiding coalition unique is you bring your individual views. We're asking you to take on the view of the district of all students, all families. So I might have a view. And I'm talking at my table and say, I've had my say, but I may know my view might not be the best statement of consultation for the whole district. So as you do your discussion, it'd be good if someone at each table would just remind everybody in the midst of all the discussion, thank you for all of our individual opinions, but what's in the best interest of the district, of all kids, all families. If you need a preference point, go to all kids, all families, and say, what do we think? And you're not making a decision, you're offering a statement of consultation. Okay? And so, offering that, what we're going to do is have you take a look at these first 3 that are on your agenda, record those on the sheets of paper, then we're going to listen to each of the tables, kind of report out, and we're going to post it. And then we're going to have you go back and spend some more time on cost threshold and timing. What do you think the cost threshold is? You've got some numbers there, right? From your perspective, is there a difference that makes a difference? And what about options, flexibility to meet enrollment beyond 10 years? Do you have any opinions or feedback on, as you look at the 4 options and think beyond 10 years, do you have any statements of consultation? So for those, this is getting into the real work of Guiding Coalition. Last time was getting you understanding a lot about the options. In a little bit, we're going to add some information on amenities. But our work today, statements of consultation, at least 1, You don't have to have 10, but at least one in each of the areas. We're probably going to take about 40 minutes or so, or 45 minutes, take a little break, come back, spend another 40 minutes or so. So this is going to be an hour and a half. We're not getting done early tonight. We're going to work on these consultations, then we're going to come back at the last 30 minutes and have a group discussion. What I'll be doing while you do your second 40 minutes is I'll be working with all of your sheets up here trying to consolidate them in a consistent statement. We're not going to be sitting here and voting up or down, nor are we going to be doing wordsmithing. Okay? It's just not a good use of time with 78 people. But what we can do is get a strong sense of consultation from each of the groups, much like we did. Remember the one time when we first heard the first reports from academics, technology, and facilities, and as a group you ended up with, I think, 4 clear statements. And everybody kind of went, we could have, those look good, the other ones, and we moved those forward to the board and to the superintendent. And we also moved them to the facilities action team. So, that's going to be our work, and we're planning on getting done at 9 o'clock. Okay? So I turn it over, and we can, a little bit more middle level expansion and amenities.
So I just wanted to provide a little bit of clarification on a couple of the topics that were discussed at length at the last meeting, and then we've received some feedback in between. We've got some resources in your original packet, and so those of you who brought them, great. If not, there's some extra copies at each table, and we've provided a little more detail. So I just wanted to go through things. If you recall the middle level expansion, a couple of the things that we're needing you to consider when you start formulating your statements of consultation is how do East and West and Pearson fit into the mix? In order to look at that, we've got a few different things that I wanted to refresh your memory. Again, in your packet, you have your bar graph enrollment projections that also have those capacity lines. And so when you're taking a look at your middle level enrollments and capacities, if you are looking at East and West specifically, you're going to have to make judgment calls and ultimately formulate statements of consultation as to where you see those buildings from a capacity and ability to meet enrollment needs. When we look at Pearson, I wanted to remind you, quite frankly, that the academics team has certainly vocalized their preferred grade configuration, and it's very likely that the plan for Pearson will be to convert back to an elementary school. And so if there are statements of consultation related to that likely move, we want to try to glean those as well. If you look at your tables tonight, there are some flow diagrams that we talked about. In your packet that was handed out last meeting, you had a copy of existing conditions. One request was to see if we could get those for the 4 options, and so that's what we've got on your tables for you to share tonight. I'd ask you to try to just ignore the titles or nomenclature on the top. Those are back to the original documents that were created for the facilities action team. But it's clear that we've got a 1,600 student in addition to the existing high school, 1,600 student new facility, and so on. So those are there for your reference. Again, to help you judge how we're going to deal with capacity and how those options are working at any given grade level. Any questions on the middle level expansion? Okay, if we look at amenities, recall in your original packet, you've got an amenities list, and there are a few items in there that I wanted to call out for you. Remember this sheet? You're going to have to dig around a little bit. Wanted to give you a few pieces of information for those of you who haven't seen. Facilities Action Team went through their ranking process, if you recall, and I wanted to remind you or let you highlight what they considered their top 5. About 2/3 of the way down, they ranked one additional sheet of ice as their top priority. They ranked district-wide safety and security as their second priority. They ranked district-deferred maintenance needs as their 3rd. They ranked sports dome as 4th. And the new stadium with amenities and locker rooms and so on as their fifth priority. I just wanted to give you those for context. And sure, sorry if I was rolling too fast. Pardon me? This was the ranking of the facilities action team. There's also a request as part of the community survey that went out in the special edition. They will be providing feedback.
So the new stadium, which new stadium? At the present high school?
It was actually down to the last one that's listed as new stadium with turf track, amenities, team locker, and so.
And then,
Can you say 1 through 5 again?
Absolutely. One addition sheet of ice, which is above the 8 from the bottom. Is number 1. Number 2 is district-wide safety and security, which is on the bottom of the list. Number 3 was deferred maintenance needs, second from the bottom there. Sports dome was number 4. That's about the 5th one from the bottom there. And then the new stadium with turf track, amenities, etc. was their pick. They have the amenities. Again, this purely from a context standpoint. Community survey is going out, and ultimately the district will be receiving feedback that way. And our hope is to seek your input and feedback on those amenities as part of this exercise and getting into your stronger table exercise. Sure.
number 5, the new stadium, that would be at the new site, 7879, or
Really, location isn't specified, and so at this stage of the game, from a conceptual cost standpoint, it would be located. That could certainly be something you would offer a statement of consultation. One other thing to point out with these amenities is I can point out 2 of them. Performing arts, large theater, the 850 seat item, which is above the 5th one down. I want you to highlight that item. And then if you go down to the 3-station field house, which is about 3/4 of the way down the page. Those 2 items conceptually, depending on how the design process works and user input works, could conceptually be captured within the costs and scopes of the existing options and would not necessarily have to be considered kind of a la carte amenities. And let me speak to that a little more. Once a bond referendum is successful, we've got well over a year worth of design as we go into a new facility, whether it's an addition to the existing facility or a new second building. That process involves user input from staff, from community, from students, from parents, from all sorts of different groups. And if you look at something like an auditorium, for instance, we don't know at this point, and it would be very premature for us to assume yet, again, whether it's new or an addition. Would you recreate an 800-seat auditorium similar to what you have now? Or would those user groups and varying folks determine that the best thing to build or incorporate into the design may be a completely different venue, if you will? And so that level of decision making will happen during the design phase. Does that make sense? But I wanted to point those 2 items out as conceptually captured within the costs and scopes of any of the 4 options. But asterisk there, if you will, not too complicated, but this performing arts large theater, by the nature of how it was formulated, would mean a very high-end performing arts venue with all the associated support spaces and so on. This is likely a bit more than what is equivalent to your existing auditorium. So I want to try to keep it simple by saying conceptually those 2 items are incorporated for now, but just know that it isn't quite apples to apples from a performing arts. Any questions on amenities at all as you review the list or look through that?
I guess I'm still not clear why district-wide safety and security is mentioned.
Right, we've had questions related to deferred maintenance and district-wide safety and security. The reason they are on this sheet, and maybe the title amenity could have been expanded, they are what we would classify as, well, to use superintendent's term, kind of non-differentiators. These items It certainly could be and very likely will be, but again, it's not option specific, and those options are very related to the secondary needs of the high school facility or facilities. And because this is district-wide safety and security, it really captures what would be done at all district facilities. That's what it's about. Everyone good to go? We'll give it back to Dennis to maybe take you into the group picture.
So again, what we're going to do is ask you to go over to your tables, to kind of work on at least one consultant statement on A through C. And if you want to make more, you can. So for an example, and I'm going to offer you some examples. We would want to create statements of consultation that are helpful and usable. For example, my superintendent talked about travel time. You could write a statement to say, we think it's really, really stupid that you think kids could possibly go back and forth 5 times. And a few of them will never go to school anyways. You could write that down as a consultant, right? Not really helpful, right? It might be funny, but not real helpful. What might be helpful is, we believe that travel times between schools should be kept to 2 or less. In an amenity, you may look at amenities and say, some of these amenities are more important to us. Here's our top 5. Or, if I take the statement you just made, security and maintenance shouldn't be considered an amenity but baseline. You see, that's helpful for the board, it's helpful for the superintendent to say, we're trying to help consult with you. You look at this, here's what we believe will make it easier, will make it more understandable, and give you a sense of the community view with district interest in mind. Okay? It's not helpful to say, half of our table would like this, the other half does not. Because then the board would say, all right, which half of us agree, which half of us disagree. It's better to say either nothing at all, or say a statement that, wait a minute, most of us can. Now, one last statement about consultative statements. It may come to pass that at your table, 5 of you really agree, 1 of you disagrees. Could that possibly happen? Yes. Once in a while, the person who disagrees, and there's not a statement you can come up with. So, suggestion. Once in a while, a person might just have to say, I don't have to win every statement. I've been in groups of doing this, and can I pick on you as a team? Okay, I'm going to pick on you, okay? You can get back at me later. So I've been in groups wrestling with consultative statements, and I'll come up with this, and I'll go, well, the 4 of you are pretty much in agreement, and you're in adamant disagreement, right? And you're unwilling to budge. But this never really happens. Okay? Don't laugh. Then I might say, do you know what the will of the group is? And you'd say, oh yeah. Yeah, it's not yours, but you know theirs. And I'll say, are you willing to let it go? You have to, I'm not saying you have to give up, but sometimes you have to say, we could talk about this for 10 hours and it wouldn't matter. So then as a group, you make a decision, do we make no statement? Or should we make a statement? Because the next statement might be the 4 of you are absolutely green, and you might be, on that one, I'm completely at odds. That's what I mean by district interest over individual interest. But I'll offer you this. Most people who serve on guiding coalitions, this is the art and the challenge of being on a guiding coalition. The ability to state my view clearly, then back up and go, I've had my say. What's best interest of the district? And sometimes it's not winning everything all the time. Okay? And bottom line, our hope is that we can do great work, good statements of consultation, because remember, this is also practice for the next time we get together in November, because there you're going to be asked to take on statements of consultation of these options from the view of a student, the view of a parent, and a member of the public. So I just have the feeling that you might even have broader disagreements when you talk about, what do we think when we take on the view of those constituency groups? So it's a good practice. What I will do, it's a quarter to 7, right? I was going to say quarter to 8 when you get in trouble. So what we're planning on is that, yes, we'll be taking this to probably 8:15. We'll have the last half hour for our work as a group to quarter to 9. We'll close with some key messages and hopefully be out of here by about 5, 9, or 9. But it's going to be the full 90 minutes. When I say consider take 45 minutes for the first 3, we'll do a check. If we've got 35 minutes and everybody is still working, we'll extend the time. It's not a race. I'll be surprised if any one of you say, oh, we're done in 5 minutes. Then I'm probably going to say, I think you should go back and talk about this. Okay? It'd be good to have one person, for some of the larger groups, at least have one person doing some writing and recording. And if you want some of the groups with just 3 at them, if you want to move to another table with just 3, you create some larger groups. So it's up to you. You don't have to, but if some of the smaller tables want to get together, feel free to do so, okay? Any questions? Again, if there's questions on academics, Nancy, she can answer anything.
On academics.
And JP?
On technology design.
His areas of expertise is technology and world peace. So ask him anything. Go ahead.
Really good at student information. It's really good on grade reporting. It's really good on things that you can't listen to. But you won't do all the canvas with regards to creating a blended learning environment, allowing teachers to really collaborate with their students, or students collaborate with each other in the course.
The academic and action plan to be implemented as equitable as possible, and that training for teachers and staff members.
Okay. Next.
Oh gosh, we have 2 more.
What did you say about A?
Oh, okay.
Just A.
Okay, we just said more comprehensive platform for K-12, and we're thinking about the Canvas program, makes consistent communication for staff, students, and parents. And then academic opportunities equitable among schools.
Okay. So we can already start to see there's some patterns here. Okay. A in this table.
I feel like all 4 building options would fit the technology and academic options.
Okay. This table.
In any of the 4 planned sites must incorporate equal and full implementation of teaching and learning and tech plans to include equal timing, support, and opportunity for every student.
Okay. This table.
We really don't have anything to add.
Okay. This table.
We believe 2 campuses and 1 mascot complicates the ability of meeting students' academic needs. Complicated.
And that was about A.
That was about it.
Okay.
We believe 2 campuses and 1 mascot complicates the ability of meeting students' academic needs. If they're going back and forth.
Okay.
Okay, so we said the academic and tech plan lends itself to any of the building options. There was some concern at the table about the efficacy of implementing an academic plan, not individual learning plans in particular. And we would also like to figure out what about the 6th grade centers working and apply those strategies to move things at the middle level.
And this table.
And we were real similar to the first statement they made and the gentleman's, what he said over there.
Okay. So I'm just going to offer by the way, all of the statements from all of the tables will be recorded. Number 1. But I think I'm just going to offer you, because what I'll be doing is looking at all these. Some of the consistent patterns, not to look at, but some of the consistent patterns that I heard was that academics and technologists appear to work with the 4 options overall with the major issues around equity, professional development, and access to academic and technology. So it could work, but the real issues are around the access, the equity, in that and about teacher and professional development to deliver it. That's an example of rolling up, but we won't lose any statements. How about B? Amenities. We'll start here.
Safety and security and deferred maintenance should be a baseline consideration and part of any referendum, any option.
Okay?
Partnerships should be pursued between the school district and the city, and any activity supported by the school district should have adequate facilities for all, not only the high school program, but the development association type feeder program.
Okay. Claire? Over here. B.
We talked about planning for amenities, it should also include the meeting with the main ballot question, whatever that
Okay.
but that they should consider other amenities as a separate ballot question, depending on which one moves forward.
Okay, so you see those are similar but slightly different. B, to this table.
We kind of just cut down to the beginning. We believe that having practice field off-site is complicated.
Okay, we're not going to call you the complicated group. But I would offer you, think about it, right? You say, wait a minute, it's not for again. Some of this is complicated. This table back here. For B?
We didn't do amenities.
Okay. This table, B.
Safety, security, and deferred maintenance are a non-negotiable baseline, and we recommend a full-scale stadium and a sheet of ice in conjunction with the city.
Okay. This table, B.
Safety, security, and maintenance are non-negotiables and should be independent of the village referendum test.
Did you go around and like say, oh, I'm trying to figure out who was talking. Okay. B.
We don't have anything more to do.
Okay. B.
District-wide security and deferred maintenance should be renamed and communicated as critical components and not amenities. And partnership with the city is vital for our second sheet of ice and other amenities as well.
So you hear some of the key statements, like security and maintenance is not an amenity. It's a non-negotiable, right? Partnerships are critical, right? And it's complicated. Okay. I'm just trying to put a little bit of humor on that. Okay. C. Why don't you start here with C? Okay. C.
Please get to that.
Okay. C.
We said we are less concerned about mascots than we are about having a successful program.
Okay. C. C.
It was perfect for you. Two mascots complicates the political situation.
Okay.
Two mascots complicates? What's that? 2 minutes.
Two mascots
It's
complicated.
not undoable, but it does.
It's complicated. C.
If there are two separate buildings, there should be two different mascots, and if there is one mascot, it should be attached to one school.
Okay. C.
Well, we're a little bit different in that. We thought that maybe, we didn't know where to split with students, but to consider surveying students at all grade levels about their feelings regarding the mascot association. I want to be a saver, or I'm going to school for school.
Okay. But that's again, we're not putting limitations to what your conversation. You said, wait a minute, have we thought about framing the question?
And no, but if kids don't really have a direct tie to being a saver or
Right.
not, this might be a non-issue and it might be a parent thing that is really sticky.
This might be an adult thing, right? Wow. Any other C's? Okay, I'm gonna offer you this. I'm gonna collect the sheets and I'm gonna offer you this. My suggestion would be is that it probably would be worth going for another 45 minutes. Just suggesting we go for another 45 minutes. That allows you to take a look at E and F. Because D is a break. So if you need a break, take it to look at E and F. And if tables did not have a chance, so let's do it this way. You got for some tables, you actually have C, E, and F. Right? So if you didn't get to, because if you don't want to talk about it, okay. But if you want to talk about it, just talk to this. Attention, between C, E, and F, and 45 minutes, spend your time on what's most important to you. Okay? For those that are all the way through, come back together. So, have we got any additional statements on C? 1, 2 mascots that people would like to offer up. Okay, go ahead.
We said if a two mascot system is adopted, a clear plan to maintain a single community must be implemented as well.
I didn't hear that.
Yep, Holly?
If a two mascot system is adopted, a clear plan to maintain a single community must be implemented as well.
Well, yeah.
Bundle them and create something to tie them together.
Right. If you're going to have two, what ties them together with the whole community so you don't split, right?
Can you give an example that was thrown on the table here, John?
Okay, an example, go ahead.
An example was if you have, for example, you have on this school is the Grizzlies, this school is the Kodiaks, welcome to Bear Country. Something like that.
Love that.
Well, the example that was thrown out at our table was that to keep a central unity and central pride, that we all have the sabers on, and then something just thrown out, and this was just thrown out, is we have, okay, we have this school is the Bears, the Grizzlies, this school is the Kodiaks, and then a tagline is welcome to Bear Country.
Can we give it up for cuteness here? And just to be clear, cuteness was about the idea, not the person, right? Okay, did you have a seat? Was there a, which table was this? Okay.
We said academics comes first before the concern of the mascot.
Okay, any other C's? If not, maybe we'll start over here with D. Go ahead. E, thank you very much. Okay, I hear it now. D, let's have more. E,
Oh, are you starting with us? Yeah.
we're starting with you.
Okay, so our cost threshold is 83 million for the building, 3 million for the security, 3 million for the maintenance, and then 6.5 million for a new stadium. And that would be a total of 95.5 million to 98.5 million because we thought we could have a little bit more in there. And then our concern is that we're going to ask for too much, and so we wanted to be conservative, so at tops 98.5 million. Voting date would be May 19th of 2015, and period.
Period. Okay, 98 in May. Go.
May 5th or May 12th would be the ideal election day for multiple polling locations, and $20 to $22 increases in the cost threshold to obtain per month.
Okay, so 20 to 22 per month, right? First 2 weeks in May, right? Okay? This group. Yep.
April 14th, too close to tax day. The June dates are close to the end of the school year, therefore May 5th. Very good option. Nice weather as well. Hopefully.
You heard it here, May 5th, guaranteed. And
the threshold for us was $23.07 a month, and so that we figured the $98 million.
$98 million, okay? This table.
We agree with what they're saying for the voting time.
Okay.
And we said that we would hope that the threshold would be at least $20.
Okay? This table.
That's about what we said also, and we should also note that May 5th is the mile, so. Okay, so then what you will. Free drinks.
So I'm just going to make this up, please don't tweet this, but in humor, right? Cinco de Mayo Day, it's going to be beautiful. Rather than getting the sticker, I voted margarita. Okay.
I think I voted.
Okay, this table. Yeah. Okay, and this table.
Our cost threshold was 120 million.
Okay.
And we did not break apart, what that amenity package was, but recognized the two things that we felt were standard in it. And our timing was May 12th.
May 12th, okay. And this table.
We believe the taxpayer threshold is up to $20 per average, as long as it's clearly communicated as a turn off amount. Voting could happen May 5th, and multiple polling locations.
Okay. Any other group that didn't have a chance? Okay.
Yeah, we addressed, we just felt, pretty, kind of really realistically said that option 4 indicates the same number of students for twice the price, and given the last one was down, it's very important that we are able to,
Okay.
take the number of courses.
Your way of looking at this, but this one was too much. Okay? Okay? So some of you are saying, and by taking it down to that much, this one here, this one option is too much. The other one ends up being, and by the way, if you go around, to some extent, you're pretty much in a very similar level, right? In a very similar time frame. Okay? I'd offer that's very helpful. So, F. First, go ahead.
We said the best option in terms of future flexibility is two high schools.
Okay. Table?
The addition to the existing high school doesn't have a lot of options beyond 10 years. Two smaller facilities gives more options for growth in 10 years. And we didn't put that on here, but we thought that the two small facilities would also give you more flexibility each year. Down the side.
Okay. This table. F.
Well, we didn't quite finish that by one, but basically we're saying that all plans have to consider the possibility of expansion or limitations at that point.
Okay. So you're just saying that all of them have to expansion has to be considered, this table. Okay? But it is. This table.
Pretty much the same thing, except there is a need to balance what is passable with what offers flexibility, and we talked about not repeating mistakes of the past.
Okay. This table.
We got nothing.
We got nothing. This table.
We talked about that, I didn't know that we had concerns, so I didn't write it down.
I think that's the thing. Please come back to us later. Okay, any other?
Our conversation was really about how the last referendum was voted down, and we heard that a lot of people voted it down because it was two schools and it split the community. So then it kind of led us to say, well, maybe the one big school is the way to go. Looking at what happened in past referendums of not making, but the one school on the existing site was not allowed for any growth. And so then we started talking about the big number 4, when you guys threw out.
So I think you're coming to the conclusion that this table says it's a bit. Right? So if you want to make any statements, what we are going to ask, and here's what we're going to offer, is we're going to record everything. And I'm going to read a sample, just a sample of A and B. We didn't do C because we didn't have all the C's in. What we're proposing to do is that we would put all the responses plus draft statements of consultation that you, as a guiding coalition, would get a link to. And you would be asked in the next week to provide feedback as to statements like, yes, that's good, I would change this word. No, I don't think that's, because we're not going to sit here till 10:30 trying to craft. And what I found is that if I'll give you a sample of what I'm taking, like A and B, that'll give you a sense of the statements. And the idea is that as you look at all the A's and B's that are in the document, that these statements kind of capture the vast majority of the statement, okay? It may not capture every view. But I think, so I'm going to give you a sample, and then we'll ask for some closing comments. So I'm just going to read. And I've had a couple people look at this. So I'll bring it over. First one gets a little long, but here's an example which you might be asked to respond to. This is A. Academics and technology recommendations accepted by the Board of Education appear to work with all four options, although one mascot, two campuses may be more complicated to implement. Key issues for implementation appear to be equity and access for all students, staff and teacher professional development, time and investment, moving to an E12 design, communication and clarity with students and family. In the end, it's about providing the best educational opportunities possible in a consistent and equitable manner. As a way of trying to go all the way across, it's a long statement, right? What you say, you'd be saying as a guiding coalition, superintendent and board, as you look at all this complex stuff, this is what we see. Please pay attention to this. For B, safety, security, and maintenance are non-negotiable and need to be removed as amenities. Right? And partnership with city and others should be pursued for delivery of amenities whenever possible and reasonable. But beyond that, I didn't see any consistent pattern in B. So there, if you look at B, you might see a bunch of different ideas, but I didn't see it like here, 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 or when I'm also watching when someone reads something. Now we didn't have an oh, but usually I'm looking for head nods where people are like, oh, yeah. We don't have one for C. Because what we came together and said, there's a bunch of different ideas around C. I am giving, so I'm just going to offer you this. I am picking up this, I'm just going to offer this, is that passing the referendum is more important than mascot. Or passing the referendum in academic success is more important than mascots. However, and then I might add in another comment, but I think I'm picking up the lead. The only consistent thing I'm hearing is that passing the referendum in academic excellence is more important than mascots. And that might be the lead statement, and then I'm going to take some of the newer statements and weave them in. Does that make sense? And by the way, that's just my role. To listen, weave, and put up a statement that you as a guiding coalition can look at in the next week and go, I'm going to give you some ideas for edits, and then what we would do is take those, create final statements, and they would be forwarded to the superintendent of the board. And realize that when we get together on November 3rd? 6th. And we're going to be at East.
Yes, East Media Center.
East Media Center, rather than here. And it's going to be 6 to 9. And our focus is going to be, as you look at all of this, what are your statements of consultation about how the options might be looked at from the lens of a student, from the lens of a parent, from the lens of the public, with these statements in front of you. So question to think about, and we'll come on and take maybe 5 minutes at your tables. What I'd like you to do is, if you had to leave right now and tell somebody what was the value of the benefit, what was the key message of your work tonight? At your tables, think of 1 or 2 statements and say, if I had to get this down into 1 or 2 statements, what would you say was value and benefit for your being here? So 1 or 2 statements for each table. Go ahead. Yeah.
We said that our key benefit was that we discussed and found consensus on what is best for the students now and in the future.
So we discussed and found consensus what's best for the students now and in the future.
I think for us, we talked about that one of the benefits is that after tonight, for some reason, things came to fruition tonight, and that we have some talking points that we didn't have
and maybe we're a bit more confident about what we can say. Okay? Another key message. Huh?
It's only gonna be $20 a month.
It's only gonna be $20 a month. Well, I would offer just to remember that your statements of consultation are not decisions of the board, which you will need to make independent, right?
We have a different answer.
Yeah.
But the correct answer is,
They said it's complicated. What I would offer is if you can go out to the public, when people say, you know, so what? And I think I've talked to the United Coalition about this before. If someone says, comes to you and says, so what? And you go, well, you know, a district meeting, that sends out a ripple through the community. Right? And you never get it back. You're only dealt with the consequences of it. Or in your own words, in your own way, you could say, you know what, we came together, a lot of different opinions, and on a lot of these key issues we were grappling with, we kind of had a very similar message, kind of reached consensus, and our focus was on students today, students tomorrow, and their success. Number two, doing this was far more comfortable and clear than it has been in the past. And we walk out with a bit more confidence that we can talk about this with clarity to the whole public. And you know what? That piece of that mailer really helps us. I think if you think about it in those ways, you'll send out a completely different.
So we agree with that and we reach consensus. I don't think we know what the community will pass.
Right. And by the way, when I use the word consensus, consensus is not full agreement. That's an odd view of consensus.
So 50-50?
No, consensus.
Yeah, it's very complicated.
And that might be the table, but when you look at some of those statements that were put up, many of those, there was differences between those statements. I was trying to pull out, well, wait a minute, there's some real consistent messages.
But the question you didn't ask, that has been asked, is which one of the four goes on the ballot? And that's where I think it's
Right.
not 50-50.
And you know why? Because that's a decision of the board to make that, and we're trying to have you take a look at all four options, think about how they work together, grapple with them, because what you don't do, you don't ask the guiding coalition to do the work of the board. It's your to give advice and feedback so that the board can make as an informed decision in this. Yeah. And I would offer you, they've heard from the facilities action team, they've heard from the academic team, they've heard from the technology team, they're going to hear from the informal survey coming off of that document, off of the flyer, and there's also going to be another broader community survey. So the board's going to have 6, 7 streams of information at very different levels, and then they got to sit back and go, So I encourage you to communicate those messages, have people read that document that was sent to all households, and when you get the link via email, please be willing in the next week to go online and offer your comments to those consultant statements, and then we'll add our work on November 6th to it. And so I'm just going to ask if from the board, if Reggie, board members, Reggie, if you at least say a comment as we close.
Yep, so I have 3 things to get you out the door. The first one is, I don't know if you said this enough, but I'm saying this on behalf of the administration and the school board. Thank you for what you guys do. I mean, you just put in 3 hours tonight. You've done this many, many nights before, and what you guys do really does matter. So thank you very much for doing this. It's a thankless task, so thank you for doing it. The second point is, I thought tonight was really substantive. The stuff that we talked about was very meaningful, very important to where we're going to head. So just listening to you guys, and I kind of felt like a little bit of a vulture sometimes. I kind of stood around and looked over the table, but it was great to hear the discussion, and it was very, very substantive tonight. I hope you felt that way. It certainly was for us observing. And the third thing is, as a board member, what I've heard tonight is going to be very helpful to us. It wasn't total unanimity. We didn't answer every question, as Alan brought up. But I've heard a lot of lot of similarities, I think you guys did too, and that's gonna help us in terms of making an ultimate decision. So it's both thank you for everything you've done, tonight was pretty neat to me, and what you've done, I think is gonna be very, very helpful to us as a school board. So thank you.
Thank you, and have a nice day.